Munch, thank you so much. Continue talking. Continue. All right, Joe, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. Thank you to Rabbi Huda for giving the shir yesterday. Today's daf is Tzadik Vav 96. I know you got up to the top of Tzadik Vav, but let's just begin. Let's just begin with Amar Rava. 2 lines up from the bottom, Tzadik Hamad Beis 95b. Just again, we'll jump into the sugya of Tviyas Einos. Remember again, yesterday we were discussing, in yesterday's daf, we're discussing the concept of visual recognition, what we call Tviyas Ayin, as opposed to, again, identifying someone with a distinguishing mark like a siman. So there's also the concept of just visual recognition. So Rava says, Amar Rava, Mereish Havamina Simna Adif mit Tviyas Eina. In the beginning I used to think that a siman, we'll say, remember from our Baba Metzia days, so a siman means a distinguishing mark in an item. I used to think that a siman was adif mitviyas eina. I used to think that a siman was better than visual recognition. Why? The hamahadrinon avireta besimna, top of Tzadik Vav, v'lo mahadrinon betviyas eina. Because we know again, when let's say if I lost an object and I seek to reclaim that object, someone finds it, I want to reclaim my object from a person, so we'll say, what's the halacha? The halacha is that simple visual recognition, meaning again, I lose my watch, you find the watch, I go over to you and I say, oh, I recognize that watch as my own. That is not enough to be able to go ahead and require you to return it to me. That's called Tviyas Ayin. Yet what? If I give a siman in the watch, right, it has a scratch on the back, it has my initials on the back, I give a siman, ultimately, again, then you would return the object to me. So therefore, again, Rav is saying over here, in the beginning I used to think that a siman is greater than Tviyas Ayin. A siman is greater than visual recognition, because again, we go ahead and return a lost object with a siman, not Tviyas Ayin. However, hashda, dishamatinu lahani shmaisesa, Amina Tviyas Eina Adifa. And Rav says, but now after I've been paying attention to yesterday's daf, right after I learned through this whole sugya, so I realized that I was wrong. And in fact, Tviyas Ayin is in fact greater than a siman. Rav says, now this is actually pretty wild that Rav says this. He says, after all, di'ilo temahachi, because if you don't say that Tviyas Ayin is greater than a siman, heich suma muter be'ishto. How is it that a blind man is ever permitted to have relations with his wife? After all, again, he's unable to see her, right? There's absolutely no ocular recognition that's taking place over there. How is it that he knows that it's his wife? Ultimately, he recognizes her voice. Now, this is actually incredible, because remember, again, this is now, what the Gemara just did, is introduced a new concept of Tviyas Ayin. Up until now, Tviyas Ayin was visual recognition. Now what we're saying ultimately is that Tviyas Ayin kind of encompasses a greater category of ways you could recognize. At first it was something, now it's someone, without being able to actively see a siman. Look at Rashi, we'll see just a moment. B'tvias ayin dekala. So how is it that a blind man is permitted to have relations with his wife if he's unable to see her? Because again, he recognizes her voice. Rashi says, B'tvias ayin dekala, shenasan daito lahakira bakal. Because it will say over time, right, he has paid attention and ultimately recognizes her voice. Ume'avida lo yalfinan, dahasa mishum chimot hamamon chayshinan, Dilma Mishaker. Da Amar Mar Gezel Va'arayis Nafshal Sha'adam Misaben Machamdasa. Interestingly enough, although this works for a summa, it does not work ultimately again for situations of Aveda, for situations of a lost object. Now, what Rashi is pointing out over here is it could very well be that the criteria for retrieving lost objects is a bit different than anything else. Why? Because by lost objects, there's a temptation to lie, because a person, by definition, has a natural desire for money and for items. So because of that, a person may go ahead and feel compelled to bend the laws a little bit for their own gain. So therefore, again, the Rashi just pointing out that it could very well be that the criteria for retrieving or reclaiming your lost object will be different in other circumstances. But I will say, but the point over here is that the Gemara is making, that Rav is making, or that the Gemara is making over here, is that halacha l'maisa we see that there's this concept of tvias ein of the kal. The Gemara goes on, v'ubnei adam eich mutarn b'nishosein balayla. And I will say, how is it, forget about a summa for just a moment, how is it that a man is permitted to his wife at night? It's pitch black, maybe he can't see his wife. How does he know that this woman is in fact his wife? Ella b'tvias eina dekala. Rather, I will say, again, what do you see from here? You see from here that there's the concept of tvias eina dekala, recognizing one's voice. So we'll say, what Gemara is pointing out over here is the power of tvias ayin. So what we've just done is we've gone from visual recognition, ultimately again to auditory recognition. But the point over here is that a siman, a physical siman, is not the only way through which we could ascertain the identity of something. So the Gemara says, "Hachanami b'tvias eina." So too again in all of the cases that we, I would have much more to say on this, but there are minors present, so I'm gonna, right? So I'll say, so again, the idea that the Gemara is saying over here is that halacha, Baruch Hashem, he saved the shir. Marty, you should know, Baruch Hashem, like it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So I'll say, so again, so the idea over here is we see from here that lemaisa, again, the concept of tvias ayin, the concept of visual recognition, ultimately auditory recognition, has the ability to be as compelling as any kind of siman. So the Gemara says weiter. So we'll say just another way of showing that tvias ayin, ocular recognition or visual recognition, is significant as a siman. So he says the following: asi betray va'amri planya dahai simna v'hai simna katal nafsha lo katlin alei. So we'll say, listen to this. If two witnesses were to show up in Beis Din, and they were to say as follows, that we saw a guy, we saw A kill B, and the guy, the murderer, had black hair and was wearing a blue coat. So they give simanim about the killer. So if you identify that Ruvain has black hair and is wearing a blue coat, would you execute him based on those simanim? So the answer is, of course not. Of course not. Look at Rashi just a moment. Teida, the tvias eina adifa. See that visual recognition is sometimes more adif than simanim. Rashi says, planya dahachi simna, dahachi simani, ploni harages anefesh, ve'ein anu makirin bo me'olam, ela simanin kach ve'kach hayu begufa ubekelav shahoreg. So imagine the following scene. Two witnesses show up in Beis Din. They say, we saw A murder B. We don't know who A is, we don't know who the guy is, we don't know who the murderer is, but we know that he has, again, black hair and was wearing a long blue coat. So the Gemara says we would not so let's say it turns out that Ruvain has black hair and also possesses a long blue coat. We would not execute him based on those simanim. Yet, v'ilu amri, Islan Tvias Ina Begave, Katlinale. Yet Rabbi say if witnesses show up and they identify Ruvain from a lineup, right? And they say, Ruvain, that's the guy. We recognize that's the guy who murdered Shimon. Halacha l'maisa, again, we would execute ultimately, again, based on that visual recognition. So we'll say, so from here you see that what? From here you see that Tvias Ayin, visual recognition, is even stronger than Simanim under certain circumstances. Amr Ravashi Teda Di'ilu Amr Le Inish Lishluchei Karye Leplanyo Dahai Simna. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, although it would appear that argument that the Gemara just advanced was probably the most compelling argument, I will say, right? Incredible. So you see from here that Lamaisa, if you were to identify the simanim of the murderer, but cannot identify the man himself, if you cannot recognize that this man is the murderer, Salach Lamaisa, that's not enough to convict the murderer. Even though I have simanim in the murderer, without tvias ayin, without the visual recognition, you cannot execute. So even though I will say that's a compelling argument by itself, the Gemara feels the need to kind of finish off the sugya with one more argument. Amar Ravashi Teda. Ravashi says to prove to you again that Tvias Ayin is even stronger than Simonim. Di'ilu Amar Le'inish Lishluchai. If a man would say to his messenger, Karye Leplanyo Dahai Simne. Vahai Simne. So we'll say, imagine I say to my shaliach, listen, do me a favor. I need you to summon someone for me, right? And here are the distinctive simanim of this guy. He has black hair, again, and wears a blue coat. So we'll say, so what happens? My shaliach goes out to try to find this guy. Safik yadale, safik lo yadale. And we'll say, so the shliach might find the right guy, might not find the right guy. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, it's a safek. However, v'ilu islay tvias in lebigavei, but I will say, if I tell my shaliach, go summon Ruvain, and my shaliach happens to know who Ruvain is and what Ruvain looks like, then what? Ki chazile yadale. Ultimately, again, when he sees him, he will know him. So we'll say, so therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, really highlighting the power of tvias ayin. So we'll say, so the ability to ultimately go ahead and visually recognize something. So we'll say, so remember, again, this kind of loops back to the sugya that we had beforehand, that halacha l'maisa, if you remember again, so just to kind of tie this all together, yesterday we were introduced to the concept of basar shenis ali mina ayin, about, again, if you take your eye off the meat, never take your eye off the meat, but if you take your eye off the meat, a concern that halacha l'maisa might be swapped out for something else. So one of the ways that we go ahead and we kind of get around that is the ability to go ahead and place a siman on the meat. Whether, again, like we saw in yesterday's daf, actually cutting the meat in some type of distinctive way, or literally placing some type of siman and wrapping it in a certain way, or I will say, again, the ability to have tvias ayin. If a person knows what his cut of meat looks like, or what the particular piece of meat looked like, there was something distinctive about it that allows him ultimately to identify it, so that would take care of the issue of basar shenis ali mina ayin. The Gemara kind of broadens this conversation a little bit to teach us that although normally we assume that the fundamental ability to identify something is vis-a-vis a siman, but yet again we see that there is also this concept of tvias ayin, the ability to visually recognize something ultimately also gives you the ability to claim ownership or to be able to positively ID it. Good. So we'll say back to Gid Hanosha. Hanotel Gid Hanosha. So we'll say going back a little bit to the fundamentals of Gid Hanosha. Someone who goes ahead, and both say this is somebody who's trebering, right? Somebody who's actively removing the Gid Hanosha, the sciatic nerve, from the animal. So both say, so we've seen this already a number of times before. How much of the Gid do you have to remove? So watch this. Hanotel Gid Hanosha, if one is removing the Gid Hanosha from the thigh of the animal, Sarech Sheyatil Eskulo, you have to remove everything. Now both say, what does everything mean? Take a look at Rashi. First Rashi in the Mishnah. Sheyital Eskulo, Yechatet Acharov, Ustam Mishnah Rabbi Meir do Amr Chatita boy. So both say, so remember again, although this opinion is without attribution, we already learned before that this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that Rabbi say it is not enough just to remove the actual nerve itself. Rather, what do you have to do? You have to be chotet, which Rabbi say means you have to remove the nerve, as well as what? all of the surrounding area around the nerve, the chaylev around the nerve as well. So Rabbi says this is what we call chatita boy, not just because Rabbi say, again, remember, a nerve is a very small, right? It's a gid. It's a very small thing. And Meir says chatita boy. You have to so the lashon over here sar sheyitel eskulo. You have to take everything. Doesn't just mean the nerve in its entirety, but rather it means the area around the nerve as well. Rabbi Huda Omer kedei lekayim bo mitzvas netila. Rabbi Huda's logic is you just have to remove enough in order to go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of netila, which I will say means what? According to Rabbi Huda, what we're going to see is you have to remove the nerve and pretty much like the immediate surrounding area. But you do not require what's called chatita. So we'll say fundamental machlokes, Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Meir, as to how you fulfill the obligation to remove gid hanosha. Rabbi Meir, chatita boy, which I will say essentially means you're removing the gid and pretty much the entire surrounding area. Rabbi Yehuda, you're removing the gid and just a very small area around the gid. Both say if you go ahead and you eat a kezayis of gid hanosha, ultimately again you get malchus. You get 40 malchus. Achlu ve'ein bo kezayis. What happens if you eat the gid hanosha and there's not a kezayis? Ultimately again, what's talacha? Chayiv. You're still going to be chayiv. Now, both say now, why is that? That even if you eat the gid hanosha and there's no kezayis, that you're going to be chayiv. So we'll say back to our makis days. Why? Beria. Now we'll say beria means what? Beria means if you eat any self-contained, under normal circumstances, where there isn't isra achila. So again, isra achila means what? How much do you have to eat? Right? We'll say you go ahead and you eat a chazer. How much chazer do you have to eat to get malchus? Again, it's astra if you eat any amount. How much chazer do you have to eat to get malchus? A kazayas. So generally, again, any isra achila, anytime you have a prohibition of consumption. Prohibitions of consumption usually are measured in the share of a kizayis, unless, of course, you have what's called the beria, right? A beria means a self-contained entity, a whole self-contained entity, even if that is less than a kizayis. Halacha l'maisi yosef b'chai. I will say the paradigmatic example of that, remember from Makkas was what? Excellent. Oh, excellent. On a mullah, right? An ant. Right, an ant, if I go ahead and I eat an ant, I'm chayiv, actually 7 different lavim, right? Even though, again, an ant obviously is not a kizayis. Why? Because an ant is a beria. It's an entity, a complete and whole entity onto itself. So therefore, the Mishnah says over here, if you eat a kizayis of gid hanosha, you'll get malchus. But remember, again, we're framing the reason I will say the Mishnah is framing the prohibition in terms of a kizayis is because gid hanosha is an isur achila. That's why we're framing it as a kizayis. But lamaisa, even if you eat less than a kizayis, you will be chayiv. Achol mizeh kizayis and mizeh kizayis, sofek shmonim. Both say, let's say again, you ate 2 gidei hanosha, right? From the left leg and the right leg. So what are you chayiv? What are you chayiv? Eri malchus. Why are both saying? Because the Tanakama is of the opinion that the prohibition of gid hanosha applies to what? Both legs of the animals. So if you ate a kizayis of the right leg, gid hanosha, a kizayis of the left leg, gid hanosha, you're chayiv. Rabbi Huda Omer, eno sofek el arbon. Rabbi Huda says no. Absolutely not. You only get 1 set of malchus. Why do both say? This is Rabbi Yehuda the Shitasu who has said that what? Gid hanosha only applies to 1 leg. And remember again, we had that strange lashon, v'hadas no senes. Logic would dictate that according to Rabbi Yehuda applies to what? To the right and not left. Remember we had the sugya. What does das no senes mean? Does that mean it's a suffix? Does that mean it's mistaber? So it came out that Rabbi Yehuda held with certainty it only applies to the right and not to the left, and therefore halacha l'maisi you will only get 1 set of malchus. We'll say a lot of information there, incredibly exciting. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Bar Piyule. We'll say Bar Piyule is a man. That's his name. Bar Piyule havakoi kamei de Shmuel. So we'll say Bar Piyule was going ahead and shechting in front of Shmuel. So what happens? The kamenaker atama hava kagoyim. So we'll say, so what happened? So he was going ahead and he was removing the gid. Right? He was trebering. So we'll say, so what did he do? Havekagoyim there also means he was leveling out the area around the gid. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Goyim le Rabbi Yehuda lo haya mechatet el gomim milamala. So both say, so Bar Piyuli, we're going to see passing like Rabbi Yehuda. So also remember again, this is very exciting. Remember in our Mishnah, what's the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda? According to Rabbi Yehuda, when you remove the gid hanasha, what do you have to do? What do you have to do? Level out. Level out. Which Rabbi say essentially means, remember, when you remove the gid is embedded in a layer of chelev, in a layer of fat. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what you need to do is you remove the gid and pretty much you level out the fat. Because remember again, you remove the gid, there's an indentation there. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, all you need to do is level out the area by the gid. That's all. According to Rabbi Meir, chatita, no, you actually need to clear out the entire surrounding area. So Bar Piyuli is trebering, he's removing the gid, and all he's doing is leveling out the area around the gid. Shmuel says to him, Amalei, Chavas Beit Fei. Shmuel says, no, you need to dig a little bit deeper. I both say this was not like a self-improvement statement, right? This was not like a spiritual statement. This was a Metzia statement. You need to go ahead and you need to remove more of the surrounding area around the gid. So Hashta lo chazisach safisa li isura. And Shmuel gives him musar. Shmuel says, had I not seen you doing this, I would have assumed that you cleared out the entire area around the gid, and you would have fed me something which was prohibited. So we'll say strong words. So Shmuel says to Bar Piyuli, it's a good thing I was standing here. Otherwise, again, you would have fed me treifus. Irsis. Bar Piyuli was very overwhelmed by, literally irsis means he became afraid. Bar Piyuli was very taken aback by Shmuel's words. Nafil sakina miadei. And the knife fell out of his hand. So both say, so remember again, Bar Piyuli was very taken aback because Shmuel's statement was a strong one. Essentially, what was Shmuel saying to Bar Piyuli? What was he saying to him? You're not conducting yourself appropriately, right? You're only going ahead and leveling out the area around the gid, right? And again, essentially, he not accused, but he said to Bar Piyuli, it's a good thing I was standing here. Otherwise, you would have fed me something that was not kosher. Bar Piyuli, who was apparently a reputable shochet and a reputable butcher, was very taken aback by this statement because, again, this was his malacha. He knows what he was doing, so he dropped his knife. He was so startled, he dropped his knife. Amar lei lo sirsas. So Shmuel says to him, no. Don't be upset. Don't be afraid. Clearly, again, whoever you learned by taught you in accordance with the position of Rabbi Huda. So again, what Shmuel was saying to Bar Piyuli is, okay, my words obviously were a bit strong, right? I'm not suggesting that what you're doing is terribly wrong, just a little bit wrong, right? But clearly, again, whoever taught you in accordance with Rabbi Huda, right? Because Rabbi Huda said what? That when removing the gid, you do not have to actively remove all of the surrounding fat. You don't have to do all of that. Rather, all you have to do is level out the area. Amar Rav Sheshes, Mai Deshakel Bar Piyuli Deoraisa Rabbi Yehuda. So ultimately, Rav Sheshes wants to again qualify what was happening. He said that which Bar Piyuli did was what was necessary mid Deoraisa according to Rabbi Yehuda. So that's interesting. Michlal Deshayer Dirabanon Rabbi Yehuda. So is that saying that? So now what's very interesting about that statement is as follows. So Rav Sheshes wants to suggest that what Bar Piyuli did was remove or do what is required mid Deoraisa according to Rabbi Yehuda, which sounds like mid Deoraisa according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to level out. But mid Rabbanon, what do you have to do? Clean everything out from the surrounding area. Mechlad Yishayid Rabbi Yehuda Ella Deorile. About say first wide line Ella Deorile Kiman Orile. So, but that doesn't seem to be true because halacha l'maisa we understand the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda doesn't require you to do anything additional midrabanan. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is halacha l'maisa. All you need to do is level out the chelev around the gid, and you're good to go. Ela Amar Rav Sheshes Mai Deshakel Bar Piyuli Deoraisa Umai Deshir Dirabanan LeRabbi Meir. Rather, Rabbi, what you have to say is as follows. What Bar Piuli did was in absolute conformance with the sheet of Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda holds that all you have to do when removing the gid is what? Remove the gid itself, and what? Level out the fat, and that's all you need. What Bar Piuli didn't do, what is required in addition, midrabanan, according to Rabbi Meir. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. So we'll say, so what we're now suggesting over here, so Di'i Rabbi Huda afil midrabanan shay. So we'll say, what comes out of here is something very interesting. Rabbi Meir agrees, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda agree midoraisa, that when removing the gid, Rabbi say, all you have to do is what? Remove the gid itself and level out the remaining area. That both Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Meir agree with that. The difference is, Rabbi Huda says, you're done. Rabbi Meir says that what? You have to now, midirabanan, go ahead and remove the rest of the surrounding area, what we call chatita. You have to actively remove the rest of the surrounding area. So apparently, Bar Piuli was conducting himself in accordance with Rabbi Huda, who says, all you need to do, halacha l'maisa, is go ahead and remove the gid and level out the area. Shmuel was giving him musar, and Shmuel said to him, the truth is, you should really conduct yourself in accordance with Rabbi Meir and midrabanan, who requires you to what? To actively, what we'll call, excavate the remaining area around the gid and clear out all of the fat. Incredible. So we'll say, so here we go. So we'll say, it's actually very interesting because, again, what's interesting to note over here is as follows, that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda agree on the da'oraisa. Rabbi Meir adds on an additional rabbinic obligation to excavate the surrounding fat and area. Rabbi Huda says, all you need to do is round out. Bar Piuli was absolutely in the right. Shmuel gives him some musar and really says, you know what? We've accepted upon ourselves the chumrah, really the chumrah of Rabbi Meir to clear out the rest of the area. We'll see what we do halacha in just a moment. So we'll say, so remember again, what did we say? So the Mishnah said, halacha l'maisa, that if you go out and you eat of the gid hanasha, even if you don't eat of the kizayis, ultimately again you'll be chayiv. Why? Because ultimately again it's a burial. So says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, lo asra Torah, ela sha'al hakaf bilvad. So we'll say, Shmuel says, and we'll say, remember, the sciatic nerve extends through a good part of the animal's leg. Shmuel comes along and says the only part of the gid that is actually going to be aser is the part on the thigh. Shene'emar al kaf hayerach. Right, literally again, I'll say it actually means on the spoon of the thigh, the rounded area. Amar Papa kitanai. So we'll say Papa says, in fact, this is a machlokes tanaim. How so? Achlo ve'in bo kizayis chayiv. So we'll say if you ate the gid hanasha, even if there was not a kizayis of gid, you're still going to be chayiv. Rabbi Huda Omer, wow. Rabbi Huda says, no, up until you're only chayiv if you consume a kizayis. So my time is the Rabbanan. So we'll say, what's the logic of the Rabbanan who say that halacha l'maisa, even if you consume less than a kizayis, you're still going to be chayiv? Because they will say beriyahi. Ultimately, again, the gid is a beria, and because it is a beria, you will be chayiv. Remember again, beria means it's an entity unto itself. And therefore, again, even if it's less than a kezayis, you will be chayiv. Amud Beis Rabbi will say, for Rabbi Huda will say, achila ksiva bei. So we'll say, it's actually quite interesting. Rabbi Huda says that by gid hanosha, the Torah uses the lashon of achila. So again, remember, whenever we see achila, achila always means what? Or we assume always means a kezayis. The Rabbanon, what do the Rabbanon do with the lashon of achila? Hahi achila dechi ispe arba v'chamisha zeisim v'achal chad kezayis mechayet. So that's very interesting. The Rabbanon will say, what do I use achila for? To teach me that even if it was a larger gid and has 4 or 5 kezaysim of gid, I might have thought that I'm only chayiv if what? If I eat all of them, kamash on that even if what? I only eat 1 kezayis, I will be chayiv as well. So the Gemara is Rabbi Huda. Where does Rabbi Huda learn that out from? Me'asher al kaf hayerech nafka. Rabbi Huda learns out that idea that even if there are 4 or 5 kezesim and I only eat 1 of them, that I will be chayiv. He learns that out from lashon of asher al kaf hayerech. Look at Rashi also for just a moment. It's Rashi in the top line, the third line down, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Hahulo itztrich lashmo'inon, de me asher akaf hayerach nafka, de lo ba'inon ad da'achalei l'kulei. We'll say, Rabbi Yehuda learns out from the lashon of asher akaf hayerach that you do not have to eat the entire gid in order to be chayiv. Da'afilu lo achal ela mashal kaf, even if you only eat that which is on the spoon of the thigh, chayiv. As long as, again, there is an act of consumption. V'Rabbanon, we'll say, what did the Rabbanon do with the lashon of akaf hayerech? Haomi baile l'chiddush Shmuel. We'll say they use that lashon to teach you the din of Shmuel. Damar Shmuel lo asra Torah ella shal kaf hayerech. Ultimately, again, Torah only prohibits what Rabbi say, the part of the gid that is on the spoon of the thigh. Rabbi Yehuda hayerech ksiv the kuli yerech. We'll say Rabbi Yehuda learns out the lashon of hayerech, the thigh, to teach you what? It's the entire gid that runs throughout the thigh which will be chayiv. The Rabbanon will say, Ha'u de pashet isura b'kuli yerech. That ultimately to teach me that what? That halacha l'maisa, in fact, the prohibition of gid extends throughout the entire thigh. Ulafuke chitzon delo. But it comes to include, Rabbi say, what we call the outer gid. Remember again, we had this in last week's daf. The outer gid, Rabbi say, is the part of the gid that runs closer to the flesh as opposed to the part of the gid which runs closer to the bone. Uli olam sha'al hakaf. But ultimately, again, it applies ultimately to the gid that is on literally, again, the spoon of the thigh. V'hai kaf mibayele lemeute of the less like kaf. Rabbi say we need that kaf to teach me that what? The prohibition of gid hanasha does not apply to a bird which does not have a rounded part of the thigh bone, to which the Gemara says, Trey kaf ksivi. In reality, the word kaf is written twice. And because it's written twice, Rabbi say we learn out both of these halachas. Number one, that it does not apply to bird. And number two, for the statement of Shmuel that we just said before. So Rabbi say, so halacha l'maisa, how do we paskin by all of these things regarding gid hanasha? So Rabbi say, so I'll tell you something very interesting. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, this is in Siman Samechei Sif Ches in Yaradea. So here we go. Shnei gidim hebiach. So we'll say, so this halacha kind of captures everything we've spoken about until now. There are two gidim ultimately again in the thigh. Echa pnimi samach la'etzem v'asheni chitzon samach labasar. So we'll say one of them ultimately again. One of them is what we call chitzon samach labasar. One of them is external, runs closer to the flesh. One of them is internal, runs closer to the bone. Shulchan Aruch paskins, ultimately again, shnehem asurim. Both of them are asur. So we'll say, so this is number one. Then when it comes to gid hanash, as much as we made a distinction between what we call the inner gid and the outer gid, just to be clear, they both branch off from the same primary gid. But we were always talking about the outer gid, which is closer to the flesh, inner gid, which is closer to the bone. Shulchan Aruch paskins, both are asur. Both are called gid hanasha. Both say not only that, but listen to this. V'tzarech lechatet achareihem. So we'll say, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's not enough to level off the gid, but rather what? You have to dig deep. Rabbi say, like who? Like who? Like Rabbi Meir. Like Rabbi Meir, right? So Rabbi say, so it's not just to remove the gid itself and to level off the area of the gid, but rather again, you have to go ahead and actively excavate what we'll call the area around the gid. Ella, here we go. Shapnimi asamin haTorah v'aposhet b'chal hayerech. Rabbi said it's the inner gid that is asr mid'oraisa, right? And that gid ultimately extends throughout the entire thigh of the animal. V'achitzon asr midivreihem. And Rabbi say what we call the outer gid, which is the gid closer to the flesh, further from the bone. That is only asr midirabanan. None of that. Rabbi say again, we're bringing everything here. Uknukanos shebishneim asr midivreihem. Both sides the knukanos. Want to remember again? What are the knukanos? Those are the little branches of the gid which extend out of the gid. In fact, again, I will say the gid generally is considered to be inedible. These kinukanos, which are the branches off the gid, are softer and are edible. Those will be asr as well. But they are asr midirabanan. And ultimately, again, I will say, what do you have to do? You have to root out, you have to excavate after the kinukanos as well. Vishumnam. But I will say, what about the fat surrounding the gid? Yisrael kiddoshim hein v'nogu b'hem isar. We'll say not only that, but the fat surrounding the gid is also going to be asr. So we'll say, so bottom line, what's asr? What's asr? Pretty much everything, right? Everything. So we'll say, so it's actually interesting. So remember again, it's the inner gid, it's the outer gid. The gid closer to the flesh, the gid closer to the bone, both are going to be asr. Although it is the inner gid, which is the part closer to the bone, which is daraisa. The outer gid closer to the flesh, ultimately again is going to be dirabanan. The kinukanos, which are the offshoots of the gid, are also going to be asr dirabanan. And it appears that in fact we paskin like Rabbi Meir, that tzarich lechateit. That is not just enough to take out the gid and to really like round off the air, but rather again, you actually have to excavate the area around the gid and mamish pull out everything around the gid. The shuman, the fat surrounding the gid, apparently is mutter mid'oraisa, but Yisrael Kiddoshim Haim, it's really not even Issa D'Rabbanan, it's an extra chumrah that Klal Yisrael that we accept it upon ourselves, that ultimately, again, the fat around the gid is asr as well. Beautiful. So that kind of concludes a little bit of the sugya regarding gid hanosh herself. Now, Rabbosai, this is actually very exciting, because the next couple of blot, Rabbosai, these are the sugyas of Isser V'Heter. Right, these are the sugyas of Basar B'chalav, as we're going to see, the sugyas of Isser V'Heter, which Rabbosai really refer to forbidden mixtures. Or Rabbosai, what we really call the sugyas of no saint tam, taste infusion. This is it. So Rabbosai, so again, almost all of the primary sugyas of kashrus are going to be contained in the next couple of blocks. So we'll say, don't let the small pages, at least for tomorrow and today, a little bit fool you, right? These sugyas are the cornerstones. We saw a lot of it. We saw, again, some of the primary sugyas of kashrus back in Avodah Zarah, but here we're going to go. So let's see, here we go. Very, very, very exciting. So let's begin. Here we go. We'll say, did I mention that this is exciting? Right? And I will say, and again, just, the way it works at Daf Yomi, it's kind of like, a lot of times it's kind of like, what's the word? Cyclical. We're engaged, less engaged, more engaged. This is a great time. Obviously, if you're here, you're already engaged. But maybe you're here, you don't come all the time, right? I'm not looking at anyone, I'm looking at my Gemara. We'll say, this is a great time, this is a great time to say, you know what? I'm in, right? This is a great time to say I'm in, because I will say these sugyas, incredible. It's incredible. Says the Mishnah. Here we go. Yerech shenes bashal b'gid hanosh. So we'll say, here we go. Fascinating case. I cook a piece of meat. Now, we'll say, now in this situation over here, I didn't treber, so I did not remove the gid hanosha. So I cooked a piece of meat whole, and the gid hanosha is still obviously in the meat itself. So what's now? What's my shaila? My shaila is, I cooked a piece of meat with something prohibited inside of it. The gid hanosha, which is asr, is inside the thigh of the meat. So the shaila is, what's the impact of the gid hanosha on the meat? So here we go. Im yeshba b'no seintam harezu asura. If ultimately, so here we go, what we call no saint tam. If the gid hanosha has the ability to infuse taste into the meat, then what? Then the meat is going to be aser. So ketzad mishano. So we'll say, how do we know that? Or how do you measure that? And we'll say, now this is even further complicated by gid hanosha. Why? Because we're going to see Rabbi say that although we dangle this concept a little bit, but we're going to further study it now of yesh begidim menosein tam, in begidim menosein tam. Does the gid have flavor? Does the gid not have flavor? So leaving that aside, the Gemara asks, how do I measure that? So both sides. So now I have a very important principle. The first important principle is that if I cook something kosher with something not kosher, how do I know if the kosher item is asr or not? So what's the answer? It depends. What does it depend on? Taste infusion. What we call, remember these words, nisinas tam. If the non-kosher item infuses taste into the kosher item, then the kosher item will be asr. The shaila, of course, is going to be, how do I measure that? So here we go. So the Gemara says, ketzad misharnosa. So how do we measure this? How do I measure if the gid infused taste into the meat or not? Here we go. Kibasar balefes. Rabbi say we're going to define all of these terms. Kibasar balefes, Rabbi say, means like meat with turnips. What does that mean? Look at Rashi. Rabbi say first Rashi in the Mishnah. Kibasar balefes. Here we go. Roin ki'ilu hayerech lifsos vagid basar. So we'll say in this context, what we do is we view the thigh of meat, and it's going to sound a little bit strange. We view the thigh of meat as if they're turnips, and we view the gid as if it's a piece of meat. Ve'ilu haya nosin tam basar kishir hagid belifsos hayerach aser dishir halacha lemoshe misinai ugemiri debahachim misharinon afa pishu the haya karov okavla. So let's listen to this. So what we do is as follows. So again, we're going to further define this thing about just for illustration purposes. Again, in general, what we see is if you cook meat with turnips, so let's say, so what happens? If there's enough meat in the mixture, then what happens? What happens? They infuse taste into the turnips, right? The turnips will have meat flavor. So we'll say, so what we do is like this. You cook a thigh of meat, and the problem is I left the gid inside there. I want to know, did the gid transfer taste to the meat or not? So here's what we do, I was saying. We look essentially at the ratio of the gid to the meat. And if I were to imagine if the gid were a piece of meat, right, the amount of gid was meat, and the thigh, if I had the amount of thigh like turnips, if I were to cook a piece of meat, the size of the gid, with turnips in the volume of the thigh, would that size of piece of meat convey taste to the turnips or not? So we'll say, so watch this. If the piece of meat is large enough to convey taste to the turnips, then right? Then what? Then ultimately, again, the thigh of meat will be treif. Because then I assume that what happened over Rabosai, that the gid transferred taste ultimately again to the thigh of meat. If on the other hand the ratio is such that such a size of piece of meat would not have conveyed taste to the turnips, then what? Then ultimately again the meat of the thigh will be mutter. They're saying, now in the Gemara we're going to get into some more precise shiurim, right? As we'll see in just a little bit, but this conceptually, understand what the Mishnah's over do is give me a conceptual framework. Conceptual framework means nesinas tam. That ultimately again, when does a non-kosher item trafe up a kosher item? If the non-kosher item is in large enough ratio that it would convey taste to the kosher item. So here we go. Git hanosha selishpash magid Rabosai. This is great. What's the next case? Rabosai, I cook the git hanosha with other kosher gidin. Rabosai, remember again, there are many nerves, right, in the animal. Only git hanosha is the only one that's aser. So let's say, so what happens? I have gid stew. Right? Who doesn't like some gid stew, right? It's supposed to snow today, nothing like, getting in the house, making some gid stew for yourself. Now, what happens? Here's the only problem with my gid stew. I have a whole pot filled with kosher gidin, and my gid hanosha gets mixed in there. This is very exciting. This is what they call the case of min bamino. Wow, min bamino. Like mixtures. So both say, now watch this. So I have a treif gid, which is my gid hanosha, mixed in with my regular kosher gidin. So what's the status of the mixture? Here we go. Gid hanosha shenis bashal magidin bisman shemakiro. So we'll say there are two variations of this case. So variation one is I recognize the gid hanosha. Right, that's variation one. I recognize the gid hanosha. Now we'll say, now that's the better case of these two. If I recognize it, so we'll say again, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Step one, take it out. Right? Step one is take it out. Now we'll say, now taking it out is only one part of the issue. What do I have to figure out now? Did the gid hanosha convey taste to the other gidin? How do I measure that? So again, bisman shemakiro bino sein tam. So I'll say ultimately again, so now the Mishnah is not qualifying this, but essentially again, if the gid hanosha was powerful enough to convey flavor to the other gidin, then the rest of the gidin will be treif. Okay? Now the good news is, now how we're going to go ahead and look at Rashi just a moment, B'no same time. Rashi says, first of all, Bisman shemakiro, mashlicho l'chutz. So first step is take out the gid hanosha. Ve'ein kan el pleitas. So we'll say, so the good news is, if I recognize the gid, I can take it out. The bad news is, I still have the flavor absorption. So how do I determine whether or not the gid hanosha treifed up everything else? But at the same time, So if we say, if the gid hanasha was powerful enough to convey taste, then unfortunately the rest of the mixture becomes asur. How we determine transfer or conveyance of taste, that the Gemara is going to tell me. Ve'im lav, they both say, so that's the good news. The good news is, if I recognize the gid hanasha, I get rid of it. If I determine that the gid hanasha was strong enough to convey flavor, unfortunately the rest of the pot is treif. If, however, I determine that the gid hanasha was not powerful enough to convey flavor, then what the good news is, as soon as you take it out, then what Rabbi say? The rest of the pot is kosher. What's the next case? The imlav, I will say imlav, the second construct is what? I can't recognize the gid among the gidin. Then I both say I have a problem. Kulan asurin. I'll say obviously if you cannot recognize ultimately again the gid hanasha, then I will say what happens? Everything is asur. Why is everything asur? Why is everything asur? Why? Because if I can't recognize the gid, then ultimately, again, as I take out my gidin one by one, I have to assume that the one that I'm taking out has the potential to be the gid hanasha. Again, we'll discuss this in more depth over here. So, okay, we'll say that's the first part. Good. Next, v'harotav beno sein tam. The Rebbe says we're going to see the gravy. Remember again, there's two parts to my gid stew. What are the two parts to my gid stew? Right? Number one, the gidin themselves, and number two is the gravy. The gravy will be asur if, again, the gid hanasha was no sein tam. When the gid hanasha is no sein tam, how is no sein tam to be determined? Next, this is not just by gidin. V'chein chaticha shal nevela, v'chein chaticha shal dag tameh. We'll say, let's say, same thing, I have a piece of non-kosher meat that gets mixed in, again, a piece of meat gets mixed in with my kosher stew. And we'll say, or I have fish, and a piece of non-kosher fish gets mixed in with my kosher fish. Shenis bashli mechatichos. They will say all of it gets mixed together. Now I want to know, can I eat the stew or not? Here we go. Bizman shemakirim beno sein tam. So we'll say, again, there are always two cases. Case number one is where I recognize the piece of non-kosher food. So we'll say that case is always easier. Why? Why is it always easier? Because then I could remove. Because Rabbi said, if I could remove the non-kosher item, then all I have to deal with is nesinas tam. Then all I have to do with is taste infusion. So Rabbi said, that's the good news. If I could do a taste infusion, it makes it a little bit easier in terms of figuring out, was it no sein tam, was it not no sein tam? So if I recognize it, ultimately, again, bisman shemakiran, then Rabbi said, the assumption is, step one is what? If I recognize the piece of non-kosher food, what's the step number one? Move it out, right? Remove it. Then I have to figure out, was there a taste infusion or not? If I don't recognize, ultimately, again, the non-kosher item, kulan asuros. Ultimately, again, all the other pieces will be asur. Now, both say, now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, but 1 second, why isn't it batal barov? Right? Why isn't simply negated in a majority? So again, the Gemara, Rashi already says that. Right? Rashi says, why isn't it batal barov? So we're going to discuss that in the Gemara. V'harotav b'no sein tam. And ultimately, again, the rotav, ultimately, again, the gravy will be asur alts nesinas tam. Right? Now, both say, so Rashi says explicitly, v'imlav kulan asurin, debechol echad yishomar dzeh u'b'gemara parachli batal baruva. So Rashi says explicitly, the Gemara will ask, why isn't it batal barov? Good. So I'll say, so again, this is the halach in the Mishnah, incredibly dramatic set of halachas. And also you begin to see, this is pretty much, again, the foundation for so much of what we have, al tilchos kashrus. Says the Gemara, let's analyze. Amr Shmuel, lo shana ela shenis bashva. So we're going back now to the first, remember, how this whole thing started was the case of where I cooked the thigh of the animal with the gid hanasha still inside of it, right? That's how this whole thing got started. So then Rabbi said we've tried to figure out what's the impact of the gid on the rest of the thigh. The Gemara just picks up on an interesting detail. Amar Shmuel lo shona elashin is vashaba. Rabbi said this concept of the gid conveying tam to the rest of the thigh is dafka adin in bishul, where you cook the thigh of the animal. That's where we assume that the tam, the flavor of the gid, is nispashet, expands throughout the thigh in its entirety. Aval nitzlaba, the Rabbi say, if you accidentally roasted the thigh with the gid still inside of it, kolef v'ochel ad shemagia legid. Interestingly enough, I will say roasting apparently has an opposite effect. When you roast the thigh of the animal, Rashi points out, the gid contracts. Rashi says, Nitzle, imo nitzmis misocho ve'inu mifafeh v'yotze babasar. So apparently when you roast, the gid contracts. When the gid contracts, it does not impart flavor to the rest of the thigh. So what do? It's actually quite interesting. If you roast the thigh, what you could do is you could eat the thigh and peel away layer after meat, eat layer after layer until you get to the gid. Once you get to the gid, what do you have to do? You remove it. Obviously, you can't eat the gid, but the idea is that the gid, and again, based on what we learned before, you'll remove the gid and all the entire surrounding area, but ultimately, again, you need not be concerned that the gid conveyed tam to the rest of the thigh. So this is actually quite interesting. Bishul is a cooking process through which flavor spreads. Roasting is a process through which the gid contracts. The nafkamina, obviously, you can never cook the meat with the gid in it. But b'di'evet, if you accidentally did it, if it's bishul, then you have to go back to the Mishnah. You have to figure out, did the gid convey tam to the rest of the thigh or not? If it's roasting, you actually could eat the entire gid. No, you could eat the entire. Right, you could eat the entire thigh. Literally, again, peel away the meat until you get to the gid, and discard the gid. Ini, is that true? V'amar Rav Huna said, "Gidi shetzlo bechelbo aser lechol afilu meiresh az." No, but 1 second, I'll say, what did we learn? Right, what we learned. Rav Huna said that if you roasted a kid, right, you roasted a lamb, and I will say you did not remove the chaylev. You didn't remove the chaylev. So we'll say, so what happens if you go ahead and, so what happens? You cannot eat even from the ear of that kid, even from the ear of that lamb. Why not, Rabbi Say? Because we assume that the chaylev was mispashet, that the prohibition of chaylev, the chaylev itself got absorbed into the entire animal. So what do you see from here? You see that when you roast something, in fact, again, the prohibited flavor does spread. We'll say top of tzad exam. With this, we'll stop. Shiny chaylev dimifafeya. So to which the Gemara says you're comparing apples and oranges, or more better stated, you're comparing chaylev and gid. Two different prohibitions, Rabbi say. Fat is in fact mispashet. The nature, which Rabbi say makes sense. The nature of fat, the nature of chaylev, is that ultimately, again, even with roasting, that flavor spreads throughout the entire animal. So if you roasted the gedi and the chaylev was inside of it, in fact, that will answer the entire gedi. But if halacha lemaisa, you roasted the animal and you forgot to remove the gid hanosha, in fact, in that case, we assume that the gid actually contracts. The flavor does not spread to the rest of the animal, and therefore halacha lemaisa, the rest of the animal will be good. But of course, you have to peel away the meat till you get to the gid, and go ahead and discard the gid. Therefore, the Mishnah's case, Rabbi says, dafka what? Dafka, a case of bishul. It is dafka with bishul that we have to be concerned that the flavor of the gid spread to the rest of the animal, and therefore we have to measure the impact of the gid vis-a-vis the rest of the basra. All right, so we'll stop over for today. Again, exciting sugyas with kashrus in the coming days.
It's this Mishnah. The two things. It starts with Ocham Gid Hanasha Kazayis. Sounds good. Also, right? You mustn't do it. So fake, Abby. And then it's in Bo Kazay, even any little bit.
Correct.